Hello and welcome dear students. This is Dr. Shabana Begum, Associate Professor in the Department of Zoology, Maharanis Science College for Women, Bangalore, and I am going to engage subunit 1.3 of Unit 1, that is Phylum Arthropoda, pertaining to BSc second semester Zoology paper 2, that is Non-Chordata. To begin with, let us understand the first concept under type study of prawn or Palemons, that is its morphology, that is the general characteristics. I am sure most of our colleagues have already started the lectures, and by now you must have come to know what the word meaning of morphology is. So along with this morphology, I am going to handle the structure of typical appendage in prawn, different appendages of prawn and their functions, and the concept of serial homology and the reproductive system and development in Palemon species. So for today's lecture, the content of the session being to know the habit and habitat of the prawn, that is Palemon, and its morphology including its exoskeleton, apertures, etc. And learning objective of this topic being, at the end of this particular lesson, the students will be able to understand and learn about the morphology or the external features or characteristics of Palemon. So here you can see a beautiful picture of Palemon, which is shown here in a colorful picture. Particular slide will give you the morphology of the prawn, that is Palemon malcolmsoni, that is a freshwater prawn, Indian freshwater prawn it is commonly called as, and it's a systematics being. It comes under the phylum Arthropoda, subphylum being the Mandibulata, class is its Crustacea, then subclass is Malacostraca, and the order being Decapoda, and the species is the malcolmsoni. So here Palemon malcolmsoni is actually the name given to the Indian freshwater prawn. There is another species which is called as Spineus, which is the marine prawn. So Palemon here is the genus name and malcolmsoni is the species name. And Madam Meera, Dr. Meera Madam, HOD has already elaborated on the general characters and classification of the phylum Arthropoda, in which she has discussed about the characters of the class Crustacea also. So Crustacea actually is a Latin term or word where the crusta means a hard shell. The forms which belong to this Crustacea class are mostly aquatic. Then they have got exoskeleton which is impregnated with lime salts, that is calcium salts. Then they have 2 pairs of antennae and 3 pairs of jaws, and they respire by means of gills since they are aquatic in nature. There are a number of examples to this class, that is prawns, lobsters, crabs, barnacles, etc. They belong to the class Crustacea. So Mandibulata is the subphylum actually, where you can say that they have got strong mandibles for chewing purpose, and the class is Crustacea, subclass being Malacostraca, etc., etc., is the systematic position of this Palemon. You can see the external morphology here. The body as such is seen very clearly, having 19 segments. I'll give a small description about it a little later. You just have a look at this picture of the morphology of prawn. Then let's study a little bit about the prawns. And prawns are small crustaceans, typically between 2 to 25 centimeters long. They are more adapted for swimming than walking. The body of the shrimp is divided into two main parts, the head and thorax, which are fused together to form the cephalothorax, and a long narrow abdomen. The shell which protects the cephalothorax is harder and thicker and is called the carapace, and it is also known as dorsal shield. The carapace typically surrounds the gills, and there are structures like rostrum, eyes, whiskers and legs which arise from the carapace. So rostrum is a rigid forward extension of the carapace and can be used for attack or defense. Two bulb-like eyes on stalks are found on either side of the rostrum. These are compound eyes, and two pairs of whiskers, which are the antennae, are also found, which arise from the head region. Next, let us study about the habit and habitat of Palemon malcolmsoni. So, I have already mentioned that these are all freshwater forms. They inhabit freshwater streams, rivers, lakes and ponds. And most of them are nocturnal creatures and lies hidden at the bottom during the day and comes to the surface during night in search of food. Palemon prefers slow-moving, clean water and feeds on algae, mosses and other weeds, some small insects and the debris. Hence, they become omnivorous. So, they are called omnivorous because they feed on both plant as well as the animal matter. They walk slowly at the bottom with the help of walking legs and swims actively at the surface with the help of swimmerets. Swimmerets are the structures or appendages which are used for swimming, and they are usually called as pleopods. Pleopods. Then this prawn breeds in May, June and July, and the females carry eggs attached to their pleopods, which are nothing but the abdominal appendages. Now let's start with the morphological detail of the Palemon. So here you can see the shape and size depending on here. You can mention the body of Palemon is elongated, bilaterally symmetrical, and the size of adult Palemon varies considerably in different species. That is, from 2.5 centimeter to 50 to 60 centimeters is their length. And usually the body is more or less spindle shaped. Next, the coloration. So, the young specimens are transparent. They are pale yellow or perfectly white in appearance, but the older specimens are differently tinted according to the species. The color is generally pale blue or greenish with brown or orange red patches and bands of different patterns. While the preserved specimens, they are deep orange red in color and on a white or yellow background. Next is the division of the body. So, the body of adult Palemon consists of 19 appendage bearing segments having two distinct regions, an anterior rigid cephalothorax and a posterior movable abdomen. Hence you can say the body is divided into anterior cephalothorax and the posterior abdomen region. The cephalothorax is somewhat cylindrical in shape and is unjointed. No external segmentation is marked. It is formed by the union of head comprising 5 appendages, bearing segments, and the thorax comprising 8 segments. Hence, cephalothorax is almost 13 segmented, while the abdomen is rounded dorsally but compressed laterally. It is jointed, that is, external segmentation is clearly marked and composed of 6 movable segments having a terminal conical piece called telson. The abdomen is often turned downwards, and each segment of the abdomen carries a pair of jointed appendages called pleopods or swimmerets. So there are 19 pairs of appendages, and the chart of those appendages is just shown in this particular slide. So the cephalothorax has 13 pairs of appendages in them, out of which 5 appendages belong to the cephalic region, that is head region, and 8 pairs are the thoracic appendages. So for the mentioning of cephalic appendages, the first pair is called as antennae, second one is antennae, third is called the mandibles, fourth being maxillulae, that is also called as first maxilla, and the fifth being maxillae or second maxilla, while the thoracic appendages are the first maxillipede, second maxillipede, and third maxillipedes, which help in feeding. The 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th appendage being the walking legs. They are also called as periopods. There are 2 chelate legs. The first and the second are called chelate legs. I will tell you about them little later. While the 6th, 7th and 8th appendages are called as non-chelate legs. The abdomen, as already mentioned, is 6 segmented, having 6 paired appendages. The first 5 appendages are called as pleopods or swimmerets, while the 6th pair is called uropod. So once again, a beautiful diagrammatic representation of different appendages can be viewed in this particular slide. Here are the appendages in which you can mention there are 5 pairs of cephalic appendages, which I have already told you. They arise from the head, and 8 pairs of appendages arise from the thorax, of which the first 3 pairs are called the maxillipedes. The next 5 pairs form the 5 pairs of walking legs. They are called periopods, P-E-R-E-I-O-P-O-D-S. The abdomen comprises of 6 segments bearing 6 pairs of appendages. The first 5 segments each have a pair of jointed appendages called pleopods or swimmerets. On the underside, shaped like paddles and are used for swimming forward. These can be used for more purposes. The 6th segment terminates in the conical plate called the telson. It is flanked, that is on either side, by 1 pair of uropods which function like rudders, R-U-D-D-E-R-S, rudders. And the telson and uropods, they form a fan that can be used for swimming backwards for short distances. Next, let us talk about the exoskeleton of Palemon. You know what exoskeleton and endoskeleton are, right? So the structures which cover the body of the organism outside is called as the exoskeleton, and the skeleton which is found inside the body is called as the endoskeleton. So in case of Palemon, the entire body and appendages, they are covered by a hard and chitinous cuticle which forms exoskeleton. I know you must be knowing what the word meaning of this chitinous cuticle, that is a covering which is rich in chitin. Chitin is actually a chemical substance which is formed of nitrogenous polysaccharide. So here the exoskeleton will have the chitin as well as protein in it. So the exoskeleton is hard and hardened by deposit of salts of lime and is colored with various pigments. So the hard pieces of exoskeleton are called sclerites, which are joined by softer cuticle forming arthrodial membrane. The cephalothorax consists of a head and thorax. The head is covered with a dorsal plate and thorax with a carapace. So usually we say the complete cephalothorax is covered over by means of a dorsal shield called carapace, which is quite hard. So you can mention the dorsal plate and carapace are completely fused to form a continuous dorsal shield. The dorsal shield is produced in front into a rostrum, which is laterally compressed and is serrated. So you know, I have already mentioned the function of rostrum is in defense or attack. So at the base of this rostrum on either side is an orbital notch, N-O-T-C-H, a depression. Orbital notch is the depression which accommodates the stalk of compound eye. So compound eyes are present which are stalked and movable. The dorsal plate has two short spines on each side. They are an antennal and a hepatic spine. The carapace hangs down on the sides of the thorax as a branchiostygite or lateral plate which encloses the gill chamber or branchial chamber in which the gills are found, which are the main respiratory organs in case of aquatic forms including Palemon. On the ventral side of head and thorax are chitinous sclerites called sterna. So on the dorsal side tergum is present, on the ventral side of the segment structures called sterna are present, and on the lateral side, on either lateral side, the skeletal is called as pleuron. And in between the pleuron and the sternum, there is a small space which is called as epimeron, to which the appendages are usually attached. And moreover, the cephalothorax is fused or joined to the abdomen by a calcified, hardened arthrodial membrane. We have already mentioned the arthrodial membrane is usually soft and thin, but in this case where it joins the abdomen, that is cephalothorax join the abdomen, it has become a calcified hardened structure. Some more information about the exoskeleton you can have from this particular slide, where you can say the dorsal shield covers the head and thorax dorsally and laterally. On ventral side are sterna. They are an anterior-most ophthalmic sternum, behind it an antennular sternum, followed by an antennal sternum or epistome, to which a medium labrum is attached. The third and fourth segments have no sterna. The sterna of segments 5 to 13 have fused to form a floor. On the sides of segments 5 to 13 are 9 pairs of chitinous sclerites called epimeron. One epimeron on each side of a segment. In the abdomen, each segment has a dorsal tergum or tergite which is broad and curved, a narrow ventral sternum or sterite. On each side is a pleuron formed from the tergum. On each side is the on each side of the thorax and abdomen, the pleuron is joined to an appendage by an epimeron, which is a part of the pleuron, which I have already mentioned. Between the segments, the two terga are joined by an intertergal arthrodial membrane and two sterna by an intersternal arthrodial membrane. In the abdomen, each segment articulates with the other laterally by pair of hinge joints made up of ball and socket, which permit movement of a segment on another in a vertical plane, but there is no movement from side to side. Finally, the external apertures, that is the external openings which are present on the body of a Palemon. The first being the mouth. So, mouth is a mid-ventral slit-like aperture which lie at the anterior end of the cephalothorax. In fact, it will be guarded by means of the other apertures like the mandibles, etc. The anus, this is the second opening which I am going to explain, is a longitudinal slit-like aperture. It is not a round structure, it is slit-like aperture which is lying at the ventral end of the base of telson. Then are the renal apertures. These are paired and each are situated on a raised papilla at the inner surface of the coxa of antennae. In fact, in Palemon, the excretory organs are a pair of antennary or green glands. They lie enclosed in the basal segment of the antennae. Each is composed of a closed sac, a duct and a thin-walled bladder which open outside by the excretory pore or renal pores or renal apertures, which are paired and situated on the raised papillae at the inner surface of the coxa of antennae. The next openings are the openings of statosis. They are nothing but the balancing organs, which we are going to do it in the class later. These are also paired, each situated in a depression at the dorsal surface on the basal podomere. Podomere is just the segment of an appendage. It's called precoxa, of which appendage of antennules. Antennule is the first appendage. So, but it bears the openings of statosis or balancing organ. Finally, there are apertures which are called as genital apertures or openings. These are also paired openings situated at the inner surface of the coccyx. So, the female genital aperture is found on the third pair of walking legs, while the male genital aperture is present on the coccyx of fifth pair of walking legs. Okay, with this I have just completed the explanation of morphology of prawn. Now I'll just try to end it up with